rabbis had, that truma shouldn't go to waste, and also we're going to be learning about truma shouldn't go, and ma'aser sheni shouldn't go to waste. So we are on 35b. 35b. Shal ma'aser sheni b'Yerushalayim, on the right side. Right, shal ma'aser sheni b'Yerushalayim. We said that in ma'aser sheni Yerushalayim, we said that you should not take an etrog of ma'aser sheni that we spoke about. You bring to Yerushalayim, and you're supposed to eat it in Jerusalem. We spoke about that, but yet you shouldn't use that ma'aser sheni etrog for the mitzvah of etrog. And the question is, why not? It's ma'aser sheni. I'm supposed to eat in Jerusalem. What is the problem? And it's a similar issue that we said for truma. We said an etrog of truma that you give to the kohen, he also shouldn't use it for the mitzvah of etrog. Why not? What's the issue? And so we brought up, so the Gemara says, here is the issue. I mean, we said the same, according to the opinion that says that the reason why you can't use the truma etrog is because we're afraid that, remember we spoke about the fact that the lulav comes in contact with water. You keep the lulav fresh, you put it in a bucket of water, and then once you're in the bucket of water, so the lulav gets wet, then your hands get wet from the lulav, and then your hands come in contact with the etrog, and the water that's on your hands will prepare the etrog to be able to receive contamination, which we spoke about. For a food, for a solid, to receive contamination, it first has to be prepared with one of the 7 liquids. Excuse me, and therefore we said that the etrog will become prepared if it's through the water that will touch the etrog as a result of the lulav, and therefore we don't want the etrog to be prepared for contamination, because we want to keep far away from truma to becoming contaminated. We make a fence. We don't want truma to become contaminated. And how do we do that? Is by not allowing it to be susceptible to contamination. So if you keep it away from water, if you keep the etrog away from water of truma, that will prevent it from ever becoming contaminated. So too, we want to do that for ma'aser sheni. We don't want the ma'aser sheni to become contaminated. So therefore, we got to keep it away from water. How do we keep it away from water? By not using it for etrog. Because using it for etrog, it's going to come in contact with water as a result of the lulav. But if you went ahead and you did use it, you get credit. You get credit, but it was just a fence that you violated. It's not a simple thing. You're violating a fence, but at the end of the day, you get credit for the mitzvah. And remember, we said a different reason why you can't use an etrog of truma is because the handling of the etrog, the more you handle it, it affects it. It gets a little dirty, or gets a little, certain things happen. Maybe not dirty, but it gets through the handling of the hand. It causes it not to be so pretty anymore. What kind of drops? Raindrops is water. Correct. Raindrops will make it susceptible to contamination. Yes, it would be. Only raindrops after it was harvested. As long as it's on the tree, of course it comes in contact with water, but that's not a problem. It will not make it susceptible to contamination. Only once it's detached from the tree, and it could be it's only, the Gemara might discuss certain of those. It might be that rain after you cut it will only be a problem if you maybe want the rain. Meaning if it's something that's beneficial for you. Meaning, let's say it's helpful to you. So even if you didn't put the water on it, but the fact that you're happy that the rain went on it, I think that's that's when the rain would make it susceptible to contamination. Again, the water is not contaminating it; it's just making it ready to become contaminated. Right? What contaminates it is when something that has the ability to contaminate comes to contact with it. But in order for something to receive contamination, it first has to be prepared for contamination. And the way something is prepared to be able to receive contamination when it comes in contact with one of 7 liquids. And if the concern is because you're going to spoil part of the etrog by handling it, and therefore we don't want you to use an etrog of truma because there's a special halacha. You're not supposed to ruin truma. You're not supposed to, and through the handling it, the outside gets a little ruined. By the 7 days of the holiday, by the time you're up to the seventh day of the holiday, the constant handling it, and especially if you allowed many other people to use your etrog, and therefore it might become you might want to throw out that extra peel. You might and therefore and that you can't do something to cause to ruin truma. The same way you can't ruin truma, so we're concerned. Therefore, you're going to come to ruin the ma'aser sheni. You can't take ma'aser sheni as its holiness, and if you're going to use it for etrog, the constant handling of the etrog will spoil that outside area of the etrog, and therefore you're causing a loss to ma'aser sheni, a physical loss. So that's going to be either you're going to throw out that peel, and you can't throw it. You can't. Either you actually ruining it, and therefore you're ruining ma'aser sheni, and you can't do that, or you're going to throw out some of that, and you might throw out some of it, and like Rashi says, the outside layer becomes nimesed, becomes disgusting through the constant handling of the hands, and maybe that in itself is a ruination of the item, and you can't ruin. You can't ruin. What do you say? You have oils on your hands, and that affects the etrog, and therefore it's deteriorating it or ruining it of some fashion, and that you can't do to truma. You can't do that to ma'aser or to ma'aser sheni. So that's what the Gemara explains. That's why you can't use it. But the Gemara continues, if you went ahead and you used it, kishera, you went ahead and used it, we say you got credit for the mitzvah. So now the Gemara explains, why do you get credit? So the Gemara says, according to the mandiyama that says that the concern for using an etrog of orla, we said an etrog of orla the first 3 years you can't use an etrog of that tree, because why? Because you have no right to eat it, and since you can't eat the orla, therefore you can't get credit for the mitzvah of etrog. But since this is ma'aser sheni, where you have a right to eat it, so therefore you get credit. Everybody would hold that you get credit for this mitzvah. But the mandi amal remember there was a different opinion. Different opinion said that the reason why you do not get credit for using an etrog of orla is because you do not own the orla. The orla, since you do not have a right to have benefit from the fruit, the produce of the tree of the first 3 years, you don't have a monetary holding in the etrog. And there's an opinion in the Gemara that says it's not enough that you have a right to eat the etrog. In order to fulfill the mitzvah of etrog, you have to have, number one, the right to eat the etrog. And there's another opinion in the Gemara that says you also have to have a monetary holding in the etrog. The lachem, that it belongs to you, has to be that you have an ownership. On paper, it's yours. And we spoke out, if something is not yours and you have a right to eat it, so that opinion would say you cannot fulfill your mitzvah of etrog. Like the Gemara said, according to Rameya, ma'aser sheni. Who does ma'aser sheni belong to? You bring it to Jerusalem, you eat it in Jerusalem. Is it yours, or does it belong to Hashem? But Hashem says you eat it, right? Good morning, Mr. Lowe. So what's the status of ma'aser sheni? So according to Rameya, he says ma'aser sheni, that tithe that you bring to Jerusalem and you eat in Jerusalem, that belongs to Hashem. You're eating, God says, I'm letting you eat from something that belongs to me. It belongs to Hashem. Even though it was yours, even though you have a right to eat it. It's not like Truma, you give it to the Kohen, it belongs to the Kohen. So therefore, according to Rameya, since you have no ownership in the ma'aser sheni, so you can't fulfill your mitzvah of etrog with something that you do not own. even though you have rights to eat it. It's yours to eat. It's yours to eat. But that's not enough according to Reb Meir. Your right to eat an etrog is not enough. And therefore, Reb Meir would say you cannot fulfill your mitzvah of etrog on Sukkot using an etrog that's Ma'aseh Sheni etrog. And that's why and therefore now, but the ruling of the Mishnah that states that you do get credit after the fact with the Eved. If you took an etrog of Ma'aseh Sheni and you said a bracha on it, and you did it for the mitzvah, you do get credit. That the Gemara says that according to Reb Meir, that says it has to belong, you have to have ownership in it. And according to the opinion that says that also it's not enough just having the right to eat an etrog, but according to that opinion, this author of the Mishnah that states that you could get credit for the mitzvah of etrog with an etrog on Ma'aseh Sheni, that's not a unanimous opinion. It's not everybody's opinion. It's only the Rabbanan, and which is the majority opinion, and not Rav Meir. It could be Rav Meir if you would hold that it's enough that you have a right to eat the etrog. That's enough to fill the mitzvah of etrog. So the Mishnah could be Rav Meir, because Ma'aseh Sheni, you can have a right to eat it. So therefore, maybe you could get credit for the mitzvah because you have a right to eat it. But if you hold two things, you not only have a right to eat it, you also have to have an ownership in it, and also you hold that etrog doesn't belong to you, then you will not be able to fill the mitzvah of etrog with such an etrog. Okay, so that ends. Say it again. Only on the first day, because the first day emphasizes the lachem. Very good. Now the Gemara continues. Old the chazazit. If a chazazit went on the etrog. Now, what's a chazazit? Chazazit is like this boil-like, like a boil that goes on to thin boils that go onto the etrog, and you could actually feel it if it's above the surface of the etrog. It's not like if you run your hand on the etrog, it's not going to be smooth. It has some sort of growth that grows onto the etrog. They translated over here this osa chazazit for boils arise, and they say boils growing different letters. This is with a zayin chazazit. Chatzitza is chet sadik yud. But the idea of what you're saying of a chatzitza, something is considered a separation. It creates a separation. Right. It makes a separate. Right. It's a chatzitza. It's a hefsek. It interrupts. It's not. As a lady goes to the mikveh, she can't have things on her body that will create a separation between the body and the water. So they say it's raised above the surface of the esrog ring, have a thickness that can be detected by touch. That's the Rosh Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, this is not, when you look at most etrogim, if it has certain type of, spots on it, but it's not a type of thing that really, you could really feel, and when you run your hand, this grows out of deterioration, with a lot of times the deterioration of the etrog, that could help this make this thing grow. So that's what the Mishnah is talking about, where the Mishnah states, if the chazazit, now the language of the Mishnah is if this chazazit goes on the majority of the etrog. If it goes on the majority of the etrog, no good. Etrog is no good. But if it goes on minority of the etrog, you're fine. That's the language of the Mishnah. But the Gemara is going to clarify and elaborate on this statement regarding this chazazit. So that's what we're up to today in the Gemara. You want to do the old-fashioned way, Mr. Loeb, or you want to do it with the Gemara? Focus. Okay. Old the chazazit. Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda says the following comment. We are on 35b. Now we already turned the page. 35b3 on the top of the page. Old the chazazit. Amar Chizuk, Davazeh. The following statement, Rabbeinu Hagadol, very beautiful statement of respect, referring to Rav, the great Rav. They call him Rabbeinu Hagadol, our great Rabbi Amaro. Our great Rabbi said it, and then also something that's not so common that you find in the Gemara, that he also gives a blessing to the rabbi. Hamokom Yehe Be'ezro. God should help him. God should help him. You know, we say that's a beautiful statement. Lo Shanu. He says the following. Now, the Gemara is going to, here's the first initial understanding what they thought he said. Lo shanu ela b'mokom echad. If the boils are in one place, one right next to the other, you know, and they are running together, these boils are running. No, now we're back to the etrog. Now back to the etrog. We have the etrog, we have the boils on the etrog, and they're running together, near each other, right next to each other, covering the majority of the etrog. That's where there's a problem. But aval b'shnayim u'shloshim mekomot. But if it's scattered among the etrog, there's a boil on this side of the etrog, and on this side of the etrog, on this side of the etrog. It can be on all different sides of the etrog. There are boils, but then and they equal, if you do the measuring, they equal the majority of the etrog. The majority of the surface of the etrog is covered with the boils, but it's not running together, not in a pattern that they're together next to each other. So kosher. The first initial understanding, they weren't going to change tunes. The first initial report was Rav Chisda said in the name of Rav that Deira would be kosher, because the only problem would be if these boils would be next to each other and take up a majority of the etrog in a straight pattern, you know, going straight, but it just covers the etrog or the majority etrog. But if it's not scattered about, no problem. It's still a matter of, I won't say no problem, it's kosher. It's kosher. It's not the ideal etrog, it's not the most beautiful etrog, but it's still kosher to use. That is the first understanding of the reading. But the Gemara says that, but it doesn't seem that can be. That doesn't make sense, the Gemara says. Why doesn't it make sense? Omale Rava. So Rava says, some have a text, Omar Rava. Rava says the following, Adarabba. On the contrary, Bishnayim Ushlosha Mekomot, if the spotting, if these boil-like discolorings that are coming onto the etrog are in multiple places, having a kimenuma. It's a spotted item. A spotted item, upasul. That should be invalid. We have a Gemara later on that says, you know, when you have, you know, when different colors coming onto the etrog, different spotted, you know, that would be it's lack of. Right. It seems like, so I think both apply. The issue is hadar. The issue is beauty of an etrog. That's the issue that the Gemara, the Torah says that etrog has to be 3/8 hadar. So if you have multiple colors, it's not just, you know, the etrog has multiple colors, that would be a lack of beauty. And similarly, this type of raising would also be a lack of beauty. And the Gemara is saying if it's raised in multiple places, it's similar to having different colors in multiple places, that it should be a lack of beauty. So the Gemara says it should be, we should treat it like menuma upasul, and it should be considered invalid. So how could you say here, let's see the commentary over here. So how could you say that if you have the etrog with these boil type of items, you're going to say it's better right. So there's boils that are above the surface that you feel. How could you say that it would be kosher if it's all around in different areas of the etrog? Different areas of the etrog should be more problematic than having it in one area of the etrog. So that's what the Gemara is suggesting, and therefore it wouldn't make sense. Meaning, I presume when you have something that if you have a nice area of something that it's beautiful, it's more likely that something is beautiful if it runs a nice percentage clean than having something that's every so it doesn't have a nice straight amount that's clean. So therefore, if you're looking at beauty, the Gemara seems to be saying something is less beautiful when it's spread about, when the blemishes are spread about, is less beauty than when the blemishes are concentrated in one area. Because if it's concentrated in one area, so then you have all the other area which would be not where it's pretty. So it's like you have an a beautiful picture of art. So this part of the picture is a nice part of the picture. This part is not nice, but this part is nice. So the Gemara is saying in etrog also, it would be more. It's a lack of beauty when there's more when the spotting is spread out of the etrog more than if it would be concentrated in one area. That's what the Gemara is saying. And therefore, how could you say that if it's spread out, it's more kosher than when it's not spread out? That's the Gemara's challenge. And therefore, the Gemara changes it. It says that can't be. Ela Itma, the Gemara says, the statement of Chizda was on the second clause of the Mishnah. Aseifa Itma, on the Seifa of the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says the following. It says, Al miuto, if these boil-like growths that are above the surface of the etrog are on the minority of the etrog, the Mishnah stated it is kosher, right? The Mishnah only stated if it takes up the majority of the etrog, will invalidate the etrog. But if it's on a minority area, it will be kosher. Comes Rav Chizda and says, by the way, that's only if it's concentrated in one area of the etrog. If the majority of the etrog does not have these spots, and the minority, it covers the minority of the etrog, but it's concentrated in one specific area of the etrog. However, but he says, if it's in 2 or 3 places, so then he said where it's spread out, if these growths are spread out over the etrog in different areas, that's like an etrog that has different discolorings in different parts of the etrog, upasol, and it would be invalid, even though it's taking up a minority of the surface of the etrog. It's only covering a minority of the surface of the etrog. I think the deterioration of the etrog, I wonder if it also has to do with people handling the etrog. Will it cause such a, but I think I saw deterioration. Maybe when etrog becomes, we always, we see what happens to fruit or things when they become old, the colors change, different things could grow as a result of it. So that should cause this type of, now I don't think we have these type of things that we see it so often. By the time Sukkot is over, I don't think we have things that are growing on the etrog that we actually could feel their, to feel it. There's when a person slaughters a animal, interesting to note, we have to check the knife to make sure the knife is perfectly smooth, that the blade, there's no nicks in the knife. So one of the things that the shochet does, the one who slaughters the animal does, before he does the slaughtering of the animal, he has to make sure the knife is perfectly smooth, no nicks in the knife. So he runs his nail across the blade. If his nail gets caught inside the blade, that means that it's not a smooth blade. That means that's one of the ways he checks to make sure that the blade You have to make sure it's smooth. It's 100% smooth, and that's what we're saying. The same thing. You got to make sure that if the etrog is smooth, if you run your finger around the etrog, good morning. If you run your finger around it and nothing, and it doesn't get caught on anything, that should be an indication that the etrog is good. If it doesn't get caught on anything. So the Gemara says, okay, so that would be that point. Now, Amar Rava, and Rava says, and a very interesting point. Rava says, Al Chotmo. There's something called the Chotem of the Etrog. What's the Chotem of the Etrog? The part of the Etrog, the way the Etrog, a Chotem is the nose, so to speak. The nose means the upper part of the etrog. Which upper part of the etrog? When it starts sloping, when it starts, when the etrog, as you go towards the top, it gets narrower, it gets smaller. That area, that's the top of the etrog, and that's the most important part of the etrog. You ever see when people buy an etrog, they want that the top part of the etrog should be clean. No spots, nothing on that area. And that's based on the Gemara over here. But the idea is, it seems that when you look at the etrog, what catches your eye the more is the top of the etrog. We find even that halacha, if that the pitum of the etrog, if the pitum gets broken off, it will invalidate the etrog. At least for the first day. The discussion about the halacha discussion, what about the rest of the holiday regarding the pitum? But we recommend definitely not to use it. But there are circumstances, the person has no other etrog, we can use that etrog without a pitum the rest of the days. But the top part, so if this would be the etrog, this area of the etrog, they have a nice, they have, in the art scroll, if you look at the picture, it's all different discussion of where exactly is this chotem, where is this top part of the etrog? But if you look at number one, you see number one, I just want to show, this is number one. So from number one and above, which are very sloping, you see, that's called the chotem of the etrog. So we're going to have an extra stringency, big time, coming up right now in the Gemara. What does he say? He says, comes Rava, and the halacha will follow this. He says, Amar Rava chotmo, if it's the chotem, if it's the nose of the etrog, even a small little chazazit, even the most smallest boil-like item, growth on the chotem, wouldn't validate the etrog. Therefore, that's why people are very careful. They're looking for that most beautiful chotem that's clean. But the way we're explaining it, if you see, as long as you don't see this type of boil-like item, it should not be a real concern. But so I'm saying that, so those little marks, sometimes they see a little black something. So it would seem that as long as it's not this growth, that you feel something, as long as, so it might not be the most beautiful thing. You know what I'm saying? That might take away from the beauty of an etrog, and therefore, we try to beautify the mitzvah. We want to get the most beautiful etrog. Doing the mitzvah, let's get the nicer etrog. So then if it has those type of those black dots or whatever it is on that area, I would think that's why you try to avoid having that area. You want that's the most important area. A lot of times you find in the lower end of the bottom of the etrog, there's these little, people are not as concerned of that area because it's not on the top. You want to, it doesn't hit the eye so much. Therefore, people aren't as concerned about it. Of course, people are trying to get the whole etrog to be beautiful, not to have any spottage, not to have any And any part, even not on, even on the bottom. But when you're going to buy the etrog, the most important part that you should look that it should be clean is that pic. If you see Mr. Haber, 35B3, that picture. You see 35B3. You are that picture on the left corner that you got. You see where it says one, the number one. See number one in the middle. You see right. You got. Here's one. See number. So one and above. But that area, that's called the nose of the etrog, according to the cleanest. That's the cleanest. That's the most important area. Got that, Ralph? That's the part you want to be the cleanest. And especially, and now if there's ever a concern that there's this, boil-like thing growing there, stay far away from ever buying an etrog. Now, if you're concerned that you have this boil, one of these spots on the lower end, the Gemara says one of these spots won't be a problem. I mean, maybe it's not the most beautiful, but here comes the Rava, al chotmo afilu b'mashahu nami pasul. Even a mashahu, even a small amount, would invalidate the etrog. Okay. Because it seems that really takes away from the beauty of an etrog. When you have something that's growing, it's not part of it's an outside growth, it's an outside boil, just like a person has on their body. The person would have a boil on their body or some sort of growth on their body. It's not pretty. It's not pretty, whatever it is. So here we're talking about etrog. The Torah wants the etrog to be pretty, hadat. Now the question, there's certain things that the halacha defines what's called not pretty. What's called, if an etrog is dry, a dried out etrog has no moisture, that's not pretty. And therefore you cannot get credit for the mitzvah of etrog if the etrog is dried out. You have last year's etrog. I want to use last year's etrog. You can't use that. I wonder if you froze the etrog and you kept it fresh. I wonder. We have to look in the halacha. It's not dried out. Would you be able to fill the mitzvah? We never heard of anybody ever freezing etrogim. I wonder what the halacha would be on an etrog that was frozen. It's
the idea of the same holiday of using last year's etrog for this year might be objectionable the same way that last year's stock to this year's stock at least undisturbed.
Right. So you would have to look at that halacha to say, is it because what's that halacha based on? And if that criteria, you have to do maybe over there, maybe is it because the Torah says you have to do something? So maybe, but by etrog it didn't use that language. It said take, so there might be differences between those requirements and the laws over there. So that would be, so it's something to answer Mr. Haber's point. It's a lack of beauty. This is understood. The Gemara, meaning when Hashem gave the mitzvah of etrog to Moshe, told Moshe to tell the Jewish people, he told them, he explained to Moshe what the law, the details of the law. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was on Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. What was he doing there for 40 days and 40 nights? So the Smag is a beautiful introduction to the Sefer Mitzvot, where he says Hashem explained to him all the details of the law, because the Torah itself doesn't have all the details. There's the oral law. So I presume what happened over there in Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, what is this? What are the laws of the pre-Eitz Hadat? What are the laws of a fruit, this etrog that you need to take? It's a great thing. And he told them, you know what? To be a pre-Eitz Hadat, kosher etrog, it cannot have this growth on the etrog. If it doesn't, the etrog has this, the shape is not as beautiful as the other shape. Okay, it's still called beautiful. It might not be, this, sometimes the etrog has the shape is sometimes this etrog, the shape is even much more beautiful, has the nice bumps on the etrog. Some things that make the etrog nicer, but it's still the other one is also still called nice, still called beautiful. But Hashem explained to Moshe, but having this growth on the etrog, that's that type of growth that you can actually feel. You run your hand across it, you can feel that growth. That's not beautiful. He explained to Moshe, if the, right, around around the neck of the etrog. What did you say? Number one, right, yeah, but now you're right. Anything in that area would be a problem. Well, what about if it's in other areas of the etrog? So then it depends how many, how if they spread out, if there are multiple places, even if it doesn't add up the majority. Right, if it's spread out, it's worse than be concentrated in one area. If you have these growths in one area and it's a minority of the etrog, it's all right. And as long as it's below the nose of the etrog. But if it's spread out on multiple areas, even if it's a minority of the etrog, it will be a problem. So these needed to be explained to Moshe, what the details, what's called beautiful and what's called a lack. Moshe had a lot to learn, exactly right. Now we can understand what Moshe was doing those 40 days, 40 nights. Have a great day, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much.